Hello boys and girls, my name is Miss Cindy and I'm your host for today. This is your teacher, Miss B. Today we will continue to learn all about an International Space Station. Today's lesson is titled the International Space Station. By the end of today's lesson, we will be able to ask and answer questions orally or in writing, requiring literal recall and understanding of the details from the text, and determine the meaning of general specific words and phrases relevant to the space station. As we continue our study of the International Space Station, your knowledge will grow. We learned in our previous lesson that the International Space Station is the largest artificial body in orbit and that it is about the size of an American football field. 3 astronauts live aboard the space station for 6 months at a time. While aboard, the astronauts make necessary equipment repairs and even conduct science experiments. Miss B, I can't wait for you to help us learn even more.
Mrs. Cindy, I'm excited too. Let's first review our vocabulary words though. We learned so much information in our last lesson that we definitely need to spend more time reviewing before we dive in a little deeper. Don't you agree, Mrs. Cindy?
100%, Miss B. You should always think about your prior knowledge before you gear up your brains to gather more information. That's how we make solid connections and better understand things.
I couldn't agree more, Mrs. Cindy, so let's jump into that now. Here you see the vocabulary words we learned in the last lesson. Let's test your knowledge to see what you remember. Are you ready? Great. Our first review word is international. Say that word. Can you tell me what international means? Remember, you can rely on the sample sentence and illustration if needed.
Miss B, international means involving more than one country.
Awesome job. On the next row, we see the definition, a force that pulls things toward one another, and the sample sentence. When the boy threw the ball in the air, gravity pulled it back to the ground. What is the missing vocabulary word?
Miss B, I use the definition, sentence, and the picture to help me figure out the missing vocabulary word is gravity.
You are correct. Okay, let's make it a little more challenging. For this one, we need to fill in the missing vocabulary word and the blank to complete the sentence. Do you think you can do it? I think you can too. So take a moment and think really hard about what vocabulary word you've learned that makes the most sense here.
The word that is missing in both places is the word orbit.
Right again. In orbit is a curved path something in space takes around another object in space, just like the photo shows the International Space Station orbiting or revolving around the Earth. Our last part will be the most challenging part yet, but I know you all can do it. Are you ready to put your thinking hats on? What is the definition of space station? And can you think of a sentence that uses the words space station?
Miss B, I heard a lot of great definitions that sound a lot like a manned satellite that is made to be in outer space for a long period of time, and sentences that easily compared to while living aboard the space station for an extended time. Astronauts are able to gather lots of information.
Awesome. I knew you all could do it. Let's keep going to review more information we've learned. In our previous lesson, we also completed a chart with a lot of information about what we saw, wondered, and thought about the International Space Station. Now let's move across each row to revisit our initial thinking. Mrs. Cindy, can you look at the first row and read that aloud to the boys and girls?
I see a space station in outer space, so I wonder, how does it float? I think it's because there is no gravity.
Wonderful. Let's move on to the next row. Listen to me as I read those statements aloud. I see a propeller on top, so I wonder what it is used for. I think it turns to move it forward. Is that what you read too? Good job. For the third row, I'm going to prompt you by using the sentence starters I see, I wonder, and I think. Your job is to fill in the rest. Are you ready? Great. Let's begin now. I see.
I see a long body.
So I wonder.
So I wonder what is inside.
I think.
I think it may be a place for the astronauts to sleep.
Wow, that was amazing. For the last two, Mrs. Cindy and I want you to turn to a partner or small group and use the sentence starters I see, I wonder, and I think to combine the information. Are you ready? All right, ready, start, go.
Miss B, I heard all of the boys and girls working hard to combine those statements about what they saw, wondered, and thought.
I did too, Mrs. Cindy. We definitely learned a lot during our introductory lesson, and I am ready to learn more. Well, off we go to the International Space Station, boys and girls, to read and learn more interesting information. Now, before we begin reading, though, let's discuss the graphic organizer we will use today during our lesson. Raise your hand if you can tell me what type of graphic organizer this is. Correct. This is a say, mean, matter chart, which is a strategy that helps us question the text, search for deeper meanings, and make connections between text and our lives. Look at the pictures below our chart. On the left, we see an astronaut in outer space, and on the right, we see the International Space Station. As we read our passage today, I want you to combine those two images in your mind to help you identify details that answer the question, what is life like for astronauts during the time that they live on the International Space Station? Also, remember, when you see the question mark icon like in previous lessons, that means to be on the lookout for text evidence. Let's begin reading the International Space Station.
Would you like to have a bedroom in outer space? Some astronauts do. The United States and other countries use the space shuttle to send astronauts to an international space station. The space station orbits Earth. 3 astronauts can live there at one time. They stay for 6 months at a time. This image shows the space station. The space station orbits far above Earth, so the astronauts in the space station don't feel the effects of gravity like we do on Earth. When we lift our arms and legs here on Earth, we have to work against gravity. That is good for us. It helps us stay in shape. But astronauts in space don't have the effects of gravity to work against. They do not get much of a workout from drifting around. They have to run at least once a day to stay in good shape. In this image, you can see an astronaut jogging in space.
It's time for our first mid-story check-in. Listen carefully to the question and remember to go back in the text for evidence. Why do astronauts need to run at least once a day?
I hear some great discussion. Miss B, I heard a group saying the fact that there is no gravity in space.
That's right. In this section of the text, it says, but astronauts in space don't have the effects of gravity to work against. They do not get much of a workout from drifting around. They have to run at least once a day to stay in good shape. These details help support our answer to the question, why do astronauts need to run at least once a day? Let's keep reading to learn more cool facts.
These two men are sleeping in space. They don't feel the effects of gravity, so they are moving freely within the spaceship. This means they can sleep right side up or upside down. It is all the same. Do you think you would like sleeping this way? Boys and girls, would you? I don't think I would care to sleep that way. I like my comfy bed.
Our next question is, why is sleeping different in space? Discuss with your partners.
Nice discussion, boys and girls. Listen as Miss B shows you where the answer is supported within the text.
In the highlighted section of the text, we can find details such as, they don't feel the effects of gravity, so they are moving freely within the spaceship. That support our answer to the question, why is sleeping different in space? That was a great job so far, but hold on tight because we're about to blast off to our Say Mean Matter chart, where that helps us question the text, search for deeper meanings, and make connections between text and our lives. Let's pause here and look back at our Say Mean Matter chart to add what we have learned. In your partner groups, look at the chart and see if there's anything that you learned that would answer some of the things we wondered about.
I heard one group share that the text said, the space station orbits Earth. That means it circles Earth. It matters because astronauts aboard the International Space Station can't feel gravity. Another group shared the author stated, sleeping is different in space. That means there is no gravity to help you lay down in bed like you normally would. That matters because astronauts can sleep in many different positions.
Boys and girls, I am so impressed with what you've already learned. So let's go back to our reading to keep up the good work.
Taking a shower in space is tricky. On Earth, the water comes out of the spout. It falls down and splashes on your body. Then it runs off. But this is not what happens in space. In space, you have to rub the water on your skin. Also, it does not just drip off. You have to scrape it off. You have to shower in a little pod. The pod keeps the water you scrape off your skin from drifting off in the air. If it drifted off, it might cause problems. It might mess up the computers and equipment inside the space station. You can see that lots of things are different when you live in space. That is why leaving the space station and coming back to Earth can be hard. It takes time for the astronauts to get used to Earth again. After months in space, they struggle with the gravity on Earth. Their arms and legs feel heavy. They find it hard to stand up. They feel off balance, but in a few weeks, they begin to feel normal again. Sometimes when they look up at the sky, they even feel a little homesick for their home in outer space.
Time for our end of story check-in. Why is taking a shower tricky in space? Discuss with your partners to find text evidence.
Great discussion. Wouldn't it be strange for the water to stay on your skin like that?
Absolutely. That would be something we'd have to get used to for sure. Let's check back in our text to see if we found the correct evidence. Did you say in space you have to rub the water on your skin? Also, it does not just drip off, you have to scrape it off as your text evidence. Great job. Before we move on, we have one more question to think about. Why would astronauts have trouble getting used to being on Earth again after being in space for a few months? Discuss with your partners now.
Miss B, I think these boys and girls are right on track. Let's see if they found the same text evidence we did.
In the second paragraph, we found the details. After months in space, they struggle with the gravity on Earth. Their arms and legs feel heavy, they find it hard to stand up, and they feel off balance. Mrs. Cindy, I am so impressed with all of these wonderful students. I can't wait to see what else they do as we add on to the Say Mean Matter chart. Remember, this helps us question the text, search for deeper meanings, and make connections between text and our lives. It is time for us to add more of what we've learned to our chart. In your partner groups, look at the chart and see if there's anything that you learned that would answer more of the things we wondered about.
Miss B, one group shared that the text said, showering is different in space. This group mentioned it matters because astronauts have to breathe differently. And another group concluded that it matters because water does not drip off in space. It can float away, so they must use a pod to keep it from doing that.
Wow, that was some really great thinking. We have already learned a lot. We learned that the International Space Station orbits the Earth, that gravity affects the way the astronauts sleep and bathe while in space, and that astronauts must exercise daily to keep their muscles in shape while living aboard the International Space Station. Now that you have learned so much about the space station, what would you want to live there for 6 months? Take some time to think about it before our next lesson. Throughout our reading of the International Space Station today, we worked to complete a Say Mean Matter chart. As you know, the chart can be used to help us make real-life connections to the text. Let's take just a few moments to think back to the chart and determine what kind of real-life connections we can make. On the chart, we discussed that sleeping in space is different and that astronauts can sleep in different positions due to the lack of gravity. Well, boys and girls, we have gravity on Earth, so we really can't relate to that exactly. However, we can think of times that we have slept differently than we normally do and think about how that feels. When is a time that you have slept differently? All of those are great examples. I heard some of you discussing that you had to sleep on the floor in a sleeping bag or even on the top bed of a bunk bed, and that took a little bit of getting used to. We can imagine that it also took the astronauts some time to get used to being able to sleep as if they were standing up or standing on their head. Let's make a connection to one more detail from the text. We learned that the International Space Station orbits the Earth. That means it makes a circular path around the Earth. When is a time that you made an orbit or circular path around something? Great answers. I heard answers such as when you played Duck, Duck, Goose and had to chase someone, and when you ran around the bases on a baseball field with the players in the middle. All of you did a great job making connections to different pieces of the text. This process is so important because connections give us a better understanding and retention of the information. Boys and girls, thank you for joining us today as we traveled back to the International Space Station. We can't wait to see you all again soon to continue our adventures. All rights and credits for today's lesson belong to Core Knowledge Language Arts. We would like to thank them for publicly sharing these valuable resources. The views and opinions expressed in this lesson are those of the Core Knowledge authors and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the Mississippi Department of Education. Goodbye, and we'll see you again soon.